to our free Crisis Jam for episode 224. I'm Dr. Brian Sims, one of the senior medical advisors with Nashville, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be a part of this particular Crisis Jam. As we've called them by many, many, many names, but one of the endearing things is the title that we've given him as the grandfather of 988. So I am honored to be a part of the Fireside Chat that we are going to be having. So I'll be hosting today, and we'll be turning that over a little bit later to Dr. John Draper, who's going to be doing the interview. And this is really wonderful because with all of the celebrations over the past 6 years, in terms of the progress that 988 has made in that time frame, Dr. Richard McKeon has just been at the center of all of it in terms of its creation, in terms of how it's developed, and what a wonderful journey it has been thus far. So we're honored to have him available today to be able to speak to us. So looking forward to that. So I want to welcome you all. And the Crisis Jam will be starting in just a couple of minutes. So in the interim, I'm hoping that all is well with everyone, that you are enjoying your day thus far. I am so happy that there are so many people that are continuing to join up on the Crisis Jam. And we'll be talking about this a little later, but there are also going to be some growth elements with the Crisis Jam. We're going to be talking a bit about going into our 6th season of it and some of the changes with the continued positive nature of 988 and with the current ideas and concepts, but we'll also be talking about your concepts as well. So why don't we go ahead and move to the next slide here. As a part of some housekeeping, and we'll repeat this during the regular jam, but just want to remind you again about the simple housekeeping items that we need to do. Please remember to stay on mute unless you're speaking. We really don't want to restrict that piece. So we'd like to have people be able to come off of mute, but if you have a speaker speaking, please stay on mute. Select the speaker view instead of the gallery view. So that way you can take advantage of seeing all that the speaker has to offer and also keep your video off during that time. But we do want participation, so please feel free to join in on the chat line and otherwise. The next piece here is really a wonderful piece because I raise this up every time we have a Crisis Jam. I do want to raise up our ASL interpreters. They are such a wonderful group, and this is such a wonderful feature where now you can bring the interpreters right directly to your screen by going to the spotted area that you see on the screen there to initiate it and bring that feature into your ability to enjoy the Crisis Jam for all that it has to offer. And next slide, please. This again is our playlist. And I was reminded a little earlier that the playlist is getting a bit aged in terms of the faces that you see because we've had so many people that have come here on previous episodes of the Crisis Jam. So many such that we're still looking, however, for more. So if you have any ideas or any thoughts, this is an open forum. We really want to make sure that you put something in the chat box, get in touch with us directly to let us know if you really feel that there's someone else that we could add to this wonderful scrolling picture list here. So next slide, please. All right. Well, we're a bit on the early side with giving this exclusive here. It's going to be about maybe 2.5 minutes or so. But before we actually get to this, I did want to reiterate again about how important it is for us to really focus on today's session. And I want to say that and reiterate it because Dr. Richard McKeon brings so much wisdom, not only to what he has helped in terms of development, but also what he is doing at the present time in helping to move that needle forward and moving the 988 concepts and ensuring that this wonderful process, which by the way has moved in leaps and bounds, but still has quite a bit of ways to go, still lets us know that his wisdom and his background, because he doesn't seek the limelight, you don't see him out in the forefront, but the work he's doing is so critical. And what we're going to see is a lot of different things that are talking about what he has done and how it's been there. So leading up to that, I want to show you this video. And this video actually is about an urgent healthcare center out of Southern Australia. And it is a great example of what we're talking about here. With everything that's been going on with the implementation of 988, it shows that 988 is not just a national thing, not just a domestic thing, but can be seen globally in terms of its effects on everything that we do. So let's go ahead and get that started.
50% of the people that we see come in with some sort of suicidal ideation, but we see people that are having relationship issues, cost of living crises, have a trauma history that is still impacting them.
The 25-year-old is a peer support worker at the urgent mental health care clinic on Grenfell Street, a first of its kind in Australia, offering an alternative to a hospital emergency department.
It's free, it's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People can arrive without a referral.
It's designed to help alleviate pressure on our EDs, and it is. This month, the clinic's marking a huge milestone, 20,000 visits since it opened in 2021.
People can stay for up to 20 hours if need be, but majority of people stay between 3 and 4 hours.
Along with walk-ins, patients are also brought in by paramedics and police. Women make up 55% of visitors, men 37%, while 7% are gender diverse. It's a one-stop shop. Social workers, nurses, psychologists and psychiatrists who can prescribe medications, along with occupational therapists and people like Soraya, who've experienced mental health battles themselves.
So we have a variety of different things. We have a TV, we have our tables that have chess and colouring, word searches. When someone's feeling distressed, sometimes they do just need a bit of a distraction.
Unlike the frenetic energy of emergency departments with bright lights and loud noises, patients at the clinic are greeted by dimmed lights, a calm environment and even a game of Uno. The majority of them feel they're able to return home afterwards, with only 5% referred on to hospitals.
You'd be surprised how much, a warm smile and a friendly voice can really help de-escalate people.
I absolutely love this video because it is so reflective of what we see here in the US. It's just good to know that the concept itself that is born out of what Dr. McKeon and others have been working on is really now a worldwide event. And it really focuses quite a bit on meeting the needs of individuals where they are, where they can come out and receive services 24/7, where you can see that these services are comprehensive, and most of all, you can see that they're really beneficial to everything that that person may need at the time. So thanks again for this particular video. So we are ready on our countdown now to go into episode number 224 of the Crisis Jam. So if we're all ready, I think I'm ready on my end as well. And good day to everyone. I'm Dr. Brian Sims, and I'll be your host for this episode 224 of the Crisis Jam. On this Crisis Jam, I am honored to be the host for this session because we have with us today what we affectionately call, or who we affectionately call, the grandfather of 988 and crisis care, Dr. Richard McKeon. So we will be coming to talk with him. Dr. John Draper is going to be bringing us the chat with Dr. McKeon. But again, we are just so honored to have him on board with us today. So if you all are all ready for this Crisis Jam, let's get going with it. So let's go to the next slide, and this is more of a housekeeping element to make everyone aware that, again, we would ask that you stay off video, and when you're not speaking, please keep it on mute. We're still having some issues that pop up every once in a while. Also, we want you to select a speaker view so that you can optimize your experience in this crisis jam. We also invite you, please, to join in with us. Put your thoughts, your questions into the chat box. And when the trivia hot seat question comes up, please answer the question so that we can get a full view of how people are thinking. Thank you. Next slide. This is again a reminder to you that we have the new ASL feature, and I've said this many times before, the phenomenal job that they do in terms of bringing the interpreters to the screen so that you can have the ASL capability available. The instructions are very clearly outlined there for you. Next. We are proud to say that as of this moment, we have had over 560 unique speakers, and the list continues to grow. And this is over 223 episodes, and this is over a 5-year span. And even though we've had that many speakers, as you saw on the screen, we are still asking you for more. If you have any ideas or anyone that you think might be a great speaker or someone who has an interesting topic related with our 988 and crisis care, we invite you to have them get in contact with us, or you get in contact with us, and we see if we can feature them on a next Crisis Jam episode. And next, and you can see from the listing there, it's just massive. Now, if we go into the next slide, it's a reminder again of going into talk.crisisnow.com. If you know of anyone who is not yet registered, please have them go in through talk.crisisnow.com, where they can come up with a lot of fascinating information. As you can see on this slide, it does feature the live streaming that now we have, that you can watch it through YouTube, or you can just connect as you always have been connecting. This is a feature that again shows us that you can also register for the Crisis Jam, and that will lend you all of the episodes that have happened in the past, and will give you updates about what's coming up, and even offer you a couple of materials that you can take with you and use in your own leisure. Next one. Again, with this, we have the recent Crisis Jam highlights, where you get a chance to see what took place last week, where we had the North Carolina's 988 and Pure Warm Line integration, and you could watch that episode if you would. And you can also see other video clips from the previous Crisis Jams, like inside the Franklin County Crisis Care Center. And it was just such fascinating information to be acquired for anything that you would like to take a look at. Next slide. And this is a reminder of all of the previous YouTube components that have been uploaded to give you an idea that there's been a lot of information that's been passed on. So next. And oh, yes, okay, I see the scroll there, but just a reminder to like it, okay, guys, and subscribe to it because there's a wealth of information there. So as we move on, we are having further debates because we're in season 5 of our debates. And the first one that is yet to come out will be debate number 9, which is scheduled for July 23rd. And this will be David Covington and Dr. Jessica Pollard that are going to be talking on coordinating follow-up care and crisis services requires high-tech software solutions. Following that one will be one that comes up on August 27th, and this will be Paul Galdis and Dr. Joe Parks on states prioritizing building capacity in the 3 core crisis services. Next slide, please. This is a kind of a teaser for you that coming up on September 17th, we are moving to a new element, Crisis Jam Unplugged, and we're going to kind of leave it at that, so to your wonderings, but it will be bigger and better, and we'll still be inviting your input as to how we can change it. Next slide, please. These are some crisis news just to share with you. The Oregon State passes a bill to address behavioral health workforce shortages. They found that they were at a 30% level, and what they've done is they've made some adjustments to try to bring in such things as scholarships and other types of incentives to try to get their behavioral workforce to build up. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over now to Debbie Plotnick, who is the Executive Vice President of State and Federal Advocacy with Mental Health America. Debbie, welcome to Crisis Jam, and please take it from there.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here again. I'm a repeat, and I'm delighted to do so, and I thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit about our conference coming up on October 16th and 17th, entitled Turn Awareness into Action, and we are giving out some amazing awards. So let me tell you a little bit about them. I'm going to start with our Peer Award, the Clifford W. Beers Award, and that's named for MHA's founder, who has shown up. His name has shown up in the hot seat a number of times. And this year's award goes to Scott Strode, who is the founder and executive director of the Phoenix. And the Phoenix is a free, peer-supported, active community for people with substance use disorder and their supporters. And Scott is a person who's been in recovery for over 27 years, and he has helped over 500,000 people in their own recovery journeys by building community for physical fitness and activity. Our next award is the George Goodman Grundy and Ruth P. Grundy Social Work Award. So many of us are social workers. It's something that really matters. It recognizes the significant contributions made to care and treatment of people living with mental health conditions by social workers. This year, it's presented to Carmen Thatcher, and she's a San Antonio-based social worker, and she oversees crisis services for 44,000 students and has, among other things, developed a computer platform to identify at-risk students. Then we have our Empower Award, and Empower celebrates the life and work of a young person who speaks out about mental health to educate peers and fight stigma. Fight in the open, like our founder, Clifford Beers. The 2025 award goes to Aria Rani Seideldecker, and she's a 16-year-old rising senior at Mountain View Senior High School in California. She's really impressive. She conducts neuroscience research and she elevates peer advocacy. She's developed statewide guide for peers in schools, and she really is doing some serious neuroscience research too. Another youth award that we have is the Youth Policy Advocacy Award, and that celebrates the work of a young person who has spoken out about systemic mental health issues to educate policymakers. So this award goes to Jasmine Goodwin. She's a senior at the School Without Walls, the High School Without Walls in DC. And she serves as the president of Penguins Mind Matter, which is a chapter of Our Minds Matter. And then we have 3 awards that are for media, for outstanding work in media. We have Liza Rama-Arke from KLW Public Radio. She did an amazing investigative series exploring the need for systemic changes in providing mental health care for Bay Area students who are Bay Area, California students who are American Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander schoolers, and she has worked on what needs to happen to make changes that are culturally tailored to help bilingual and bicultural students and to build the workforce that best serves them. The 3rd media award goes to the Anxiety Club. This is a film. It's heartfelt and humorous. It's through the lens of some of today's most brilliant comedians, and it demonstrates how to bridge humor and mental health. And I'm going to put the link in the chat, and you can see the amazing list of comedians who appear in this film. We also have extra credit, and that's the Michigan Learning Channel's PBS affiliates teen hosted program by 2 wonderful young women named Paige and Brooke, and they talk about mental health myths. They break down things that are true and not true, and why it's important to check in with your peers. And then another award that we have is the Richard Van Horn Innovation in Programming Award. It goes to one of our affiliates. Richard Van Horn was very well-known advocate in California, the head of our MHA in California. And this year we're honoring our Mental Health Association in New Jersey. They have an amazing program called United by Wellness. We have an award celebrating equity, the Betty Humphrey Equity Champion Award. And this is going to Casa del Sud, which is in St. Louis, Missouri. And it provides high quality clinical and mental health services to uninsured, underinsured people with a focus on immigrants and refugees. They have 25 clinicians. They serve more than 300 clients in their preferred language. And last and certainly not least is the Joseph Durham III Policy Award. And Joe is someone who is very important to us at Mental Health America. He was our general counsel. He was on our public policy committee for many years. And this award celebrates the spirit of Joe Durham. And it's going to MHA of Indiana's executive director, Stephen McCaffrey. Steve is a very well-known advocate, not just in Indiana, but nationwide. And when I talk to people all over the country, they tell me they know Steve and they're following his models. And Steve has been on countless boards and gubernatorial commissions and done national advocacy. And like Joe Durham, also followed in the footsteps of Joe Durham with our Mental Health America National Policy Committee. And so those are our awards. We hope you'll join us. I'm going to put in the chat the link to see all these awardees and to register for our conference. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today.
And thank you, Debbie, for that. And congratulations again to all of this year's change makers. We are so honored with that. I want to move now to our next feature, which is our Crisis Jam Showdown. And in this Crisis Jam Showdown, you, the audience, get an opportunity to respond to the questioning. So for today, since we are featuring the grandfather of 988, I want to pose this question: which of the following initiatives spearheaded or influenced by Dr. Richard McKeon laid the foundation for what would become the 988 Lifeline? Your choices given are A, Crisis Now, B, NSPL expansion, C, Mental Health Parity Act, and D, Garrett Lee Smith grants. So please feel free at this point to put your answers in the either in the chat box or respond directly to the poll. And we'll get a see how people do. We've had such wonderfully great responses from the audience. You guys have been pretty targeted. So let's see how we do this time. So as we look at it, we're kind of all over the board, but the most one that we see, okay, it disappeared. So I'm just going to move ahead. The one that we see the most, they're kind of torn between the NSPL expansion and the Crisis Now. So let's see what the actual answer is. And the answer is the NSPL expansion. Dr. McKeon was instrumental in supporting and expanding the NSPL in its early years, which laid the groundwork for the transition to 988. Now, while he also contributed to broader policy and prevention frameworks, that Lifeline expansion was a defining achievement tied directly to the future of 988. So again, thank you for all who you responded. And we are ready now to move into our feature presentation. So without further ado, we are moving on to Fireside Chat with the grandfather of 988 and crisis care. And I'm going to ask Dr. John Draper, the president of Research Development and Government Solutions with Behavioral Health Link, if he will take it from here. John, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you so much, Brian. And even though it's a hot summer day, I don't mind ever sitting fireside by my dear old friend, Richard McKeon. So great to see you, Richard.
Great to see you too, John.
So we have traveled a long road to get to where we are today at 988, Richard. There was a lot of turns along the way. And I wondered if, looking back, there were three turns that you thought were pivotal in terms of getting us to where we are today at 988.
Yeah, I think there are three that I can identify. But first, my grandchildren have asked me to let you know, John, they'll be following up with you about the issue of copywriting my grandfatherhood. So just to let you know that they're on top of that. They're kind of zealous
All right.
Around the use
Your
of that
grandchildren,
term.
your 988 grandchildren is what I want to know.
Okay. So yeah, I would say there were three pivotal points in the road to 988. First was in 2001, when a group of suicide prevention organizations went to the Hill with the visionary concept of a nationwide network of crisis centers unified by a single number. And they went to the office of Senator Paul Wellstone, who obtained the first $3 million appropriation in 2001. So that was the start. And so obviously that was crucial. It was visionary. I think the second one that I would identify, John, was one that you were instrumental in, which was that during that period between 2001 and 2004, part of the funding was devoted to doing an evaluation of effectiveness, right? And those results came out, particularly in 2007. And those results, so two things, the results themselves were groundbreaking. First, showing the impact of the hotline on reducing suicidal ideation. But also instrumental was what, John, you and Vibrant did in organizing the crisis center community and suicide prevention experts around the country to implement the recommendations coming out of those evaluations, including the standards for suicide risk assessment, and the notion that if you call the National Suicide Hotline, you should be asked about suicide, because that was not happening routinely. And there are still some today who don't think we should be asking every caller about suicide. But I think the evidence is overwhelming. Evidence on universal screening in emergency rooms shows doubling of identification of suicidal people. So it is absolutely life-saving. So I think that whole effort to integrate the findings from the evaluations into ongoing practice was the second key point. It built the credibility of the network. And the openness of the network to change and learning was extraordinary. Of course, the third piece of this was the more direct road to 988, which really came about because of the efforts of advocates in the state of Utah. I often refer to Representative Steve Eliason as the one indispensable person in the creation of 988, because his organization of advocates in Utah, legislators in Utah, interfacing with the Utah congressional delegation, led to the National Suicide Lifeline Improvement Act, calling on reports from SAMHSA and the VA, where we strongly recommended the establishment of a 3-digit number. And then the FCC was called upon to identify a 3-digit number and recommended 988. So I would regard those as the three most critical points.
Yeah, not unquestionably. I don't think there's a whole lot of debate around that, but really a nice elucidation of those three pivotal points, Richard. And, you know, I don't know if there's ever been at SAMHSA a suicide prevention expert as the head of the suicide prevention branch for so many years like you. And you probably, in looking at those evaluations, it wasn't just about showing that hotlines were effective, it was showing what works with suicide prevention. And I wondered, what did we learn from those evaluations? Not just that hotlines were effective, but what did we learn about preventing suicide overall?
Well, we also learned that how you interacted on the call was significant, right? So for example, the importance of quickly establishing good contact with the caller. There has to be rapport. And while you have to ask about suicide, you can't just answer the phone and say, "Are you suicidal?" Right? You have to be working with the person, hearing their story, and weaving into the conversation the questions that are part of a suicide risk assessment so you can understand. It was clear from the evaluation that there were numerous people who were suicidal but didn't say anything because they weren't asked. And also the importance and the viability of not overreacting when there are suicidal thoughts present. And that is essential now for 988. One of the real advantages when you call 988 is that you'll get someone who has been trained and is not going to be immediately so anxious that they over-respond.
Yeah.
You need to be able to listen and hear, understand, but establish a connection while simultaneously assessing the risk and working collaboratively with the person on a safety plan that can benefit them moving forward.
Yeah, that's all very true, Richard. And maintaining that supportive connection is itself a lifeline for so many people in suicidal crisis. But also, as that suicide prevention expert, you've been a major proponent of follow-up care. And that was also, you were behind the follow-up grants for 988. We know that they are effective in preventing suicide. We also have these three pillars of the crisis care continuum of someone to respond, someone to talk to, someone to respond, and a safe place to go for help. But there's not and someone to follow up pillar. And I'm wondering what's missing here. Why is it that we don't talk about follow-up much? And and could you talk a little bit about the importance of follow-up in the continuum of care? And also, why is it that if all crisis centers are required to do follow-up care, outbound contacts, that they also don't report those important contacts to the states and SAMHSA regularly? It seems like that should be, if they're so important, that we should be reporting those contacts as much as inbound contacts. Could you speak to all that, please?
Yeah, so I mean, I certainly agree completely regarding the importance of follow-up contacts from the time that the first evaluations showed that there were people who were thinking about suicide who had called, and that upon 6-week follow-up by Madeline Gould's research team, upon that 6-week follow-up, there was about 42% of them who had experienced a recurrence of suicidal ideation, but only about 20% had connected to any kind of mental health provider. And that was what led us to start the Crisis Center follow-up grants, which still exist today. But I think that where we are right now in the development of 988 is that follow-up is the critical issue in 3 different ways. And I think we have moved forward in a number of different ways. It is, when you look at SAMHSA's report to Congress on saving lives in America, follow-up is heavily emphasized as being essential. Follow-up is required as part of the network agreements with Vibrant. The next step for us is having a system that allows us to monitor what's happening after the call in 3 different ways. One is when calls do go to 911. We know that that happens in well less than 2% of all calls. But we need to know what happens next. Was the contact made? What happened to the person after that? Second, as part of the whole model, we want to be able to connect with mobile crisis teams wherever they exist. And so we need to be able to be looking at that kind of data on an ongoing basis. Where is it happening? Where is it not happening? And then finally, are people getting connected to outpatient care? That is also crucial. That tells us something about the health of the mental health system. Can people get into care? And of course, we know that the follow-up call itself is a powerful intervention. So it's not only about whether the person gets linked to care, it's that they feel cared about because somebody has followed up with them for that. So being able to monitor the extent to which that is or is not happening, I think is the critical issue right now moving forward.
That makes sense, Richard. Maintaining that connection across the continuum of care is essential for people not to get lost. And you mentioned in passing 911, and 911 is not a federally managed service like 988 is. We leave that up to states at the 911 level. But as states are getting more and more involved now, which is a really exciting development with 988 and really investing in 988, could you tell us about how the federal role in 988 is essential to this service and why it's needed and why it's different from 911?
Well, I would mention a couple of things. So I think one role that we have is to identify best practices and lift them up. I'm very intrigued by what a number of states are doing currently and had conversations with some of the efforts that they are making to track the what is happening with people who are calling 988 and to put them, for example, on public-facing dashboards. Wisconsin has done that. North Carolina has done that. I'm really intrigued with the work in Pennsylvania and California. So we want to be able to support those efforts. The other thing is that I think that SAMHSA has a crucial role regarding quality improvement, right? Being able to monitor how things are going. And, some states may far exceed our standards, but others may not. And so we want to be able to be aware of not only the answer rate within a state, but the quality of the care. And so that is an important role, for us, as well as to promote quality improvement and building the data systems that will help inform us on an ongoing basis. Let me just give you one example. A key issue is always around referral to 911, right? And so it would be very useful to know not only the national data we have, and Vibrant did a great job releasing a paper that kind of summarized what we known, at least as until recently. We're continuing to try to build those systems. But it would be useful for states to be able to compare their rate of 911 referral to a national rate. Not saying that there's a specific ideal number, but we would want to understand variation, right? We would want to understand things like our safety plans being able to be completed, and if not, why not? Is it pressure to answer calls, whatever? So these are the kind of things where I think, as part of quality improvement, the federal government has a really important role.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. I could talk with you all day and have many more questions, but I guess we'll have to do that next time I see you.
Okay.
Here. Brian, let's turn it over to our discussants.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you both for that very inspiring fireside chat. Dr. McKeon, thank you so much. You'll see a lot of the chats in the questions in the chat box, but a lot of affirming of what you talked about. It was an old statement that said, I don't look like what I've been through. And it was such an acknowledgement of the initial portion of assessing everyone, but also Preston Looper had placed in there about the fourth pillar potential of looking at follow-up as a part of the care. So thank you again, all inspiring and a lot to take to the table with us. So we'll move now to the roundtable discussants, and we have with us as our first discussant, we have Dr. Brian Hepburn, our Executive Director here at the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors. And Dr. Hepburn, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Brian. And it's really a pleasure to be a discussant after this fireside chat. John Draper is always great as a moderator, and I can't think of anyone that I would rather chat with than Richard. I mean, as you just heard, when you talk to Richard, you get a historian, you get an academician, you get somebody who leaves you with a feeling of optimism, of hope, which I think is really important to the field. When Richard talks about his history, what he has contributed, it's really involved with a movement that started in the early 2000s, and he's been one of the chief leaders of it. But what he leaves you with is a feeling that it's much broader than him, that there are many things that he's been involved with, but really appreciates the work of others. And I think that's part of his leadership style. I want to take it back to Richard a little bit. His style of leadership has been so inclusive and so helpful over the years. When I was in Maryland, this was many years ago when Richard and I were much younger, and we were developing a strategic plan for suicide prevention. And we called on Richard to come in and be a consultant to us, and he was so instrumental at helping us. I use this as an example because he did this all around the country. He provided to the states an expertise that helped them with their strategic plans. He's still doing that in his current position, providing leadership. When we're looking at 988 and we're looking at how far we have come over the last 3 years, we know we've got a lot more to go. We've got so much further to go. And Richard makes you very aware of that we still have so much to do to help decrease the risk of individuals moving ahead with suicide. So much that we still need to do to help especially marginalized populations. So I just want to thank John and Richard for their fireside chat, especially to thank Richard, and also to say that I think his grandchildren will be very, very proud that we call Richard the grandfather of this movement. So thank you. And I think Brandon Johnson is the other discussant. And I just want to say, nothing could make me prouder than to be a discussant along with Brandon Johnson. Brandon is terrific, and I'm very proud of him and the work that he's done. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to be here, especially for this conversation, and specifically with Dr. McKeon. For those who don't know, I actually worked under Dr. Hepburn and Richard in two separate spaces. I want to talk about the work first, and then I'll get into Richard in a sec. But incredibly grateful and honored to be able to work with Richard and to just see the work of 988 moving forward and the things that he's been able to put together. I think one of the really cool things about this space and about this work with Richard is that, a lot of what, we focused on, a lot of what Richard focused on was getting this out, getting this implemented, being able to build up the Lifeline system to move into 988 and to talk about these components, to be able to look at, how we're answering the phones, to be able to get chat and text integrated, and to do that, to build up the Lifeline call centers. And the thing I really appreciate now with Richard is that now he's transitioning into the how. We talk a lot about what we should do and where things should go in crisis and the crisis continuum, but Richard is now focused his attention on what's the how look like, where are we getting best practices in mobile crisis delivery. How do we think about embedding crisis components into CCBACs and FQACs, educating the public on when to call 911 versus 988. And these are the practical how pieces there. And so it's great to be connected to someone who can plan and think about the planning, but also when it gets to the practical of, yes, we should do this, but what does it look like? How do we do it? How do we do it with limited resources? How do we take care of the workforce while we're doing it, right? How do we make sure the compassion that we're training our workforce to engage with others, how do we do that for them as well? How do we pull in lived experience and ensure that we're pulling in those voices as well in the workforce and in how we develop our best practices? And so it's always great to chat with Richard and to talk with Richard about those things, but we're seeing 988 and SAMHSA churning out these products that really focus on the how, and that's where the change happens, right? Not talking about what to do, but also giving folks the blueprint and the how to do it. And I just want to leave with this. I'm incredibly grateful for Richard. For those who don't know, Richard hired me as a young state suicide prevention coordinator from Maryland 8.5 years ago. And his really focus on knowing where my interests were, where I wanted to grow, where I wanted to build, and allowing me to do that. I'm incredibly grateful for that. And when Richard made the decision to transition into his role at 988, to have the trust in me to lead the suicide prevention branch is something that I don't take for granted. And so Richard has been an incredible advocate for me, especially working on the national strategy and all that entailed right into moving into this role. So I appreciate Richard. John mentioned his leadership, and his leadership in helping me to be in position to do this work, still answering calls, still, having the ability for us to have conversations and to think about where to go next in the field. It's truly an honor to share this space with you, especially today, and to give you your flowers. And so much of what we do and so much of what we stand on are really on the shoulders of Dr. Richard McKeon. And so it's an honor to call you friend and colleague, and looking forward to continued work in this crisis space together. And so I know you're into your grandfather stage, but you got to stick around a little longer. Can't go anywhere yet. But we appreciate you and all that you've provided to this field.
Thank you, Brandon.
Brandon, thank you so much. Dr. McKeon, thank you so much. I'm going to ask the chat folks out there if you'll continue to do something that may not actually come through the way we wanted to, but let's blow up the chat box, because I see a lot of really wonderful comments coming in there, Dr. McKeon, that are just thanking you for your tireless work that you've done over the years. Maybe we could just keep that going for the rest of this particular time, Dr. McKeon, because there's so many people that are so grateful for the work that you've done, and it's showing not only in the chat box, but just with their inner conversations as well. So just wonderful. So thank you, Dr. Hepburn. Thank you, Brandon, for those comments. And at this point, we're going to turn it over to our NASHBIT update and bring back Dr. Hepburn, our executive director. Dr. Hepburn.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to briefly talk about a couple of things. One is the budget reconciliation that was just passed by the Senate and is now back in the House. And just to say that states have a concern regarding the Medicaid funding for mental health and substance use disorder. We know that prior to 1980, almost all of the funding under the Mental Health Authority was through state general funds. Since 1980, Medicaid has really helped to expand the coverage for people with serious mental illness and to make sure they're able to get the services that are needed. The support for mental health through that time has been bipartisan. We are hoping, the states are hoping, that the end result of the reconciliation will be one which individuals with serious mental illness and individuals serious substance use disorders will continue to get the needed services. Wanted to bring that to your attention and just indicate how much we're following and hoping for a good outcome. The second thing I wanted to bring up was there's recently been increased attention to the use of psychedelic medication as part of as a treatment tool. And this is an interesting area of research at this time. Some of the psychedelic medications have been shown to be effective in post-traumatic stress disorder, especially for veterans. So this is an area, though, that many of us are not very well informed about. So I would encourage you all to look up a little bit about psychedelics. And one of the podcasts that's out there that may be a good introduction is Oprah's podcast on the therapeutic use of psychedelic medication. And it's available on YouTube. And we will be trying to bring you more information on this topic. It's something that many of us know more about in terms of the recreational use of drugs as opposed to the therapeutic use of psychedelics. But there is a good research basis for us to look at whether these medications may be helpful. And but what we need to do is really inform ourselves and make sure that we have the needed resources and that we have the needed research in order to make decisions about using these tools. So thank you for that, and I'll pass it back to you, Brian. Thank you.
And Dr. Hepburn, as always, thank you so much for your leadership and your involvement with the 988 efforts that are going on over the years. We don't want to minimize that in any respect. We just thank you so much for all that you do in this field as well. As we move to the next one, just want to show you that we're getting some progress here in terms of Crisis Jam features illustrated in various states. You can still see some areas that need to be covered. So if you happen to be from one of those states that are listed, please get in contact with us if you have something in mind or some sort of feature that you'd like to see highlighted. Please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. We'd really like to fill this board out in its entirety. So next, we are now at our state spotlight, and it is my honor to present Senator Tina Orwell, very, very, very noteworthy individual who has spoken on this round many times, and we just welcome you, Senator, to the state spotlight. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you. And it's such an honor to be here. The 988 Jam has been a guiding light for us. And Richard, your wisdom and support has really helped our state and all the states move forward. As everyone knows that maybe has seen me, I love music. And I was trying to think what my theme song for the Washington presentation would be. And I was going to do Everybody Hurts by REM, but then I realized it was voted the most depressing song of all time. And since I was in Nashville this weekend and supposedly I was on Broadway and so was Taylor Swift, I did not see her. I'm going to do This Is Me Trying by Taylor Swift. And what I love about the song is it really recognizes that we all have mental health struggles, that we all feel inadequate at times, but it's about perseverance. And so that's what the theme of this is how do we keep moving forward even during difficult times? And what is the role of the state to make this work happen? right, and happen and support the workforce, because we know it's very difficult work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the legislation we've done in Washington. Next slide. One of the things that we're all looking at is how do we make sure 988 is really a responsive system? And to be an alternative to the police, it needs to be able to respond in some areas within 15 to 20 minutes. It needs to be a multidisciplinary team, including peers. And one of the things we're finding is that, when you put people into these situations, they're stressful, you can be well trained, but things can go wrong. And so one of the things that really came up looking at like the 911 and EMS system is they have a lot of liability protections. And so we started looking at that. And it's interesting because, I think mental health has always done crisis work, but I think it's a different caliber that we're really creating right now. And we're hearing more feedback from our mental health system about how can you hire and retain staff. Next slide. So one of the things we looked at was we looked at the liability protections that they have with 988 and EMS staff. And, a lot of them really are around good faith. Like if you are working and you're well trained, that you're protected when things go wrong. And when we started looking at, how do we mirror the 988 system and all of our resources and response with 911 and their system, we started trying to create that same kind of immunity protection. One of the things that we looked at, though, that wasn't apparent is that we want 911 and 988 to work together. And sometimes they're resistant from sharing and moving cases back and forth because they don't feel protected. And so we're doing a lot of co-location in our state of 988, 911, and 211. And so we wanted to make sure that all the professionals know that when you move cases back and forth, are you responding to this, that you're protected under our laws. And again, we work closely with the trial attorneys. And basically, it doesn't protect against gross negligence or misconduct. But if you're doing your work and you're within the realm of your practice, you are protected under Washington law. So, excuse me. And so we're really excited about this. We think this is telling the system, move forward with this work and with these partnerships. The other thing I would tell you and remind you is that, the role of the state and the legislature is to support you. We work for you. And it really is about educating us about what you need. And so Washington has an amazing team. A lot of them are here today. I know Jen Stuber's here, who I saw Taylor Swift with in Amsterdam. I'm just saying. But, part of it is teaming up with your legislators to say what you need. And this may or may not be on your radar screen. But again, just wanted to share this. House Bill 1134 is a rapid response and reliability, and we can share more. So thank you.
And Senator Orwell, thank you so much. I love the portion where you are emphasizing the interoperability, but I also want to point out that Washington State has been one of the leading states for innovations and new movements. So it's always wonderful to have you on, and we thank you for the time that you've taken out to give us a responsiveness as far as what you're doing in that wonderful state of Washington. So thank you ever so much. And we are now going to move to our next segment, and we're going to bring on Stephanie Hepburn with our crisis talk.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. So this week I interviewed Dr. Jonathan Pirtle, and he's an associate professor at NYU's School of Global Public Health. He and his colleagues dove into 988 usage, both since its launch and also in 2024 alone, so last year alone. And they found that people in the South use 988 less than those elsewhere in the US. The highest use was in the West, followed by the Northeast, and then the Midwest. And in the South, 988 use was about 36% less than in the West. And that's both in terms of total contacts since July 2022 and in 2024 alone. And I'd like to bring on John Draper and Richard McKeon to chat with me a little bit to give their reflections on the data as well.
Yeah, I'd love to offer some thoughts, Stephanie, too, in particular. I thought it was a really important study. First, in terms of thinking about it through the lens of high states or high suicide rates among states, I thought it was really encouraging to see that Alaska and New Mexico, who have two of the top 4 highest rates of suicides of any states, also had the highest usage of 988, but number 1 and number 3, Montana and Wyoming, did not. So they had low usage rates. So it begs the question, what is Alaska and New Mexico doing right? What can we do like them? I think one other point worth noting that Jonathan Pirtle was, I thought, really right in comparing the 988 usage rates with the usage of emergency departments, or in this case, perhaps overuse of emergency departments, and really found that across the board, it's not having a huge impact on diverting people, at least the number of calls from 988 in terms of diverting people from EDs, which is a reminder that we don't just need to be partnering with 911 call centers at 988. We have got to partner with emergency departments, and they need to partner with us. That's a lot of folks that they're serving that they may not need to be serving, that we could be serving. So there should be emergency departments working alongside crisis centers to not only promote awareness of folks who come to the ED and say, upon discharge, make sure that you know next time you can call this number instead of coming here much of the time. And then secondly, perhaps having a contract or an MOU with them to do follow-up. So upon discharge, the 988 centers are following up with individuals so they can develop a relationship with a 988 center instead of EDs. Richard, I know you have thoughts too.
Yeah, so 3 things, I think. So one is that we have done some work in the 988 office on groups at high risk for suicide, including older rural men, and looked at what messaging worked and what was effective, what was less effective. And of the groups that we looked at, older rural men were the least responsive. So one question is whether hotline use lagging in the South reflects greater rurality. But you made an important point, John, that the finding that states like Alaska and New Mexico, primarily rural states, are doing well shows that it is, it's not inevitable. There are things you can do. So that's really instructive, for us. And your point about the correlation with emergency room usage is also important. Now, in order to be more effective in diverting from emergency rooms, we probably need more mobile crisis, more crisis stabilization, but we also need more transparency into the system to be able to know what are the blockages. And we need to know that for the people who are showing up in the ER, are they calling 988, but they still need the emergency room anyway, which could be perfectly appropriate, or are there people who didn't call 988, who didn't think to call 988, where our communications efforts need to be stronger in order for us to have that diversionary impact that we would want. And when I say a diversionary impact, what we want, of course, is to divert from emergency room use while having positive outcomes for the person.
To bring up the figure from the study, it indicated that people throughout the US are 2.24 times more likely to head to the ER for a mental health issue than contact 988. And I think both of your points are right on. I mean, I think when we think about marketing, how has that had an impact? I don't think the study and what they're going to do in the future is going to actually look at marketing, but I think it will give us more data, especially as they start examining the impact of service fees and other funding models on 988, and they start diving into that data, not just from 2024, but next year and this year as well. I think that will give us more information in terms of what has been successful, but I love the point of looking at those successes in the areas that maybe didn't fit the demographic. And why is that? Is that marketing? And like you said, Richard, also, it may not be direct marketing, but it may be grassroots marketing that's getting at those rural communities to be able to realize that there are options for them as well, aside from the ER. I thank you both so much for hopping on with me, and I'll pass that back to you to Dr. Sims. Thank you.
Oh, no, before you pass it back, Stephanie, you kind of went through something that I thought maybe if we could keep them on for a second.
Yeah, sure.
You had placed a question in the chat box that I thought was very intriguing, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, where you wanted to talk about the balance between the standardization.
Right, I did.
You want to get a quick comment or something on that?
Sure. I was asking Richard, I was asking, you know, when we look at the balance between standardization versus having very tailored messaging towards communities, what's that balance look like? You know, we kind of toggle between, a lot of my writing toggles, a lot of experts are chronically saying we need to have standardization. And you actually mentioned needing to also have a national figure that people are trying to aim towards when it comes to their call answer rates, for example, or their contact answer rates. What is the balance there between standardization and tailoring both messaging and efforts towards communities specifically?
Well, I think that the balancing is obviously critical. And if I had a formula, exact formula for it, that would be great. But let me mention two things. It needs to be customized enough. When we're talking about communications, it needs to be customized enough that the person listening to it feels that it is speaking to them, right? So, but it also has to incorporate certain key principles. And one of the things that I'm most interested in is also how can we spread awareness of 988 while doing safe messaging, but also if we could figure out a way to do messaging that lets people know about 988 through stories of hope and recovery, what's called the Papageno effect, that we know that stories of despair, of tragic outcomes can have an unwanted effect, but what's called the Werther effect. But we also know that that stories of struggle, hope, and recovery can have a positive impact and can play a role in saving lives. So I'd love to figure out a way that we can do that at the same time that we're educating around 988.
Wow, thank you so much. And thank you, Stephanie, for hanging in there. Dr. McKeon and John, absolutely. Thank you guys for awe-inspiring presentation. We are so looking forward to continuing this work. Dr. McKeon, again, we just applaud you for all that you do and all that you continue to do, but this is not to take anything away from you, John, or any of the other, Brandon, and all of those who've been working in the 988 realm. This is just such a great testimony. I could have continued this for another hour, but unfortunately we're given just that shortened time frame. So thank you to all of the folks who were on today. Before we close down, I just wanted to run through really quickly what's going on. Coming up next week is episode 225. You want to be here for A Day in the Life of Crisis Care, Part 3, which is a safe place for help. And then following that, in 2 weeks, we'll have episode 226, which is South Dakota's creative solutions to increase access and care. So with that, I will thank everyone for joining us on this Crisis Jam. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye now.